The main thing you can do is to not have any fear around it. If you start feeling afraid of this, or like it might going to hurt you, I mean, you're asking for how do you protect yourself? That's not necessarily fear. It could be just being rational. I don't know, but if there's components of fear in there, then that will create a problem. The fear will create a problem all by itself. So there's a couple of things that may be going on here. One is you might think, why me? Who's that, and why is it here, bothering me? And the answer to that has a fairly good probability of being, it's a fear test. It's a test just to see how much fear you have. And on the other hand, it could be that that being isn't so malevolent, but when you saw that being standing there, you had enough residual fear left in you that you immediately kind of, because it's strange, because it was unwelcome and unbidden, you tend to think of a malevolent attitude. And you see it that way, and that malevolence is really just your interpretation of the data, not necessarily true. That's another thing that could be going on. You may be imposing that from your own interpretation of the data, and that would then be an expression of some of your own fear that there's things out there that might get you. And you see something strange, you kind of jump to the conclusion that it's one of those things that can get you. You feel the malevolence. You feel the malevolence because you fear the possibility of malevolence. So that's another possibility that's going on there. If you do have a lot of fear wrapped around it, you will create something a lot worse. Things like that eventually can become thought forms of your own creation, and they basically feed off of your fear. They grow more and more strong, more and more invasive, more and more annoying, the more you fear them. Your fear is their lunch and dinner. They grow on your fear. And there are any number of people who are harassed by non-physical beings, and they think it's sort of like a possession or something, but basically they're beings of their own creation. They're created out of their own fear. And the more fearful they get, the more the harassment goes up. So it escalates. In the beginning, it's kind of small, but then that fear starts to give them more power, and pretty soon they're reduced to kind of hiding under the covers, and these thought forms are just giving them a very hard time, just kind of pushing them out of their own existence. So fear is a problem. You have to be very careful that you don't respond with fear. All right, now, having said that, that's kind of the warning that's involved. Having said that, you should or could try communicating with this being and seeing what they're about. Try to, and if they, give a big evil laugh, one of those big laughs, and come up with blood dripping off their big teeth, and that kind of thing, then all that's just made up. But I say if you get to know him, you go over and talk, and if suddenly he blows up into something scary, that's just a fear test, because that's the way fear tests are. So that's why I say going over and having a conversation would be an interesting thing to do, just to see what happens and find out, why are you here, and why hanging out here, and why me, and what interests you here, that sort of thing, and get some of that. And if you don't get any communications at all, then it's probably just a projection of your own fear. If it's really an entity, it will probably communicate with you if it's got that much interest in it. So, what can you do to protect yourself? We'll get you to the bottom line, is really what you wanted in the first place. And that is, one, have no fear. Don't feed it with fear. Like don't feed the trolls. It's sort of the same thing, Don't feed the non-physical beings either. So the next thing you can do, you can put a protection field around yourself. Now, all this it's another mind game. It's a metaphor. But what the metaphor does is it focuses your intention on a particular intent. So let's say you say this field is a bubble. So then in your mind, you create this bubble of light around you and your family. And if your family goes someplace else, the bubble goes with them. A piece of the bubble goes with them. So they're always covered in this bubble of light. And in your mind, that bubble of light protects them from anything negative, anything that would harm them in any way. Now, again, it's a metaphor. It's the kind of things, just like we use light to heal other people. It's a metaphor. But the metaphors work because what the metaphor does is it gives us that intent for that thing. So your intent is that this thing will not be able to hurt you, that it won't be able to come across the bubble, and it will then therefore be harmless. And when you have that intent, then of course you raise the probability that it won't hurt you and will be harmless, because that's your intent. So by having that strong intent that you put out all day long, you take a couple of seconds and put a little extra energy in that intent, and you will see that it'll work. And you won't have any trouble with it. So you can build a barrier around yourself and your family to protect it. That's another thing you can do. And the bubble is just kind of an obvious thing, but you can create any kind of a metaphor you like, a metaphor that suits you better. A thing that's not good to do is to go want to fight it, go want to do something to it, because that's just negativity and fear, and that just feeds it. So don't feel like you have to go kill it or do something to it. You can talk with it, but not fearfully.